better get my slides running. Okay, yeah, I think I'm good. First of all, I'd like to thank Directions Magazine for inviting me here today to give this presentation. I'm going to talk about 40 years of success and LiDAR advancement at Optech. And I want to indulge you a little bit and share the fact that last month we did celebrate our 40 years as a company, and I think that's a milestone worth reviewing to some extent. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Optech, what we've done in 40 years, focus on the airborne LiDAR history because that's the most significant part of Optech's business has been airborne LiDAR. And I'll talk about some of the defining technologies that we're confronted with today in both airborne and also mobile. But most importantly, I want to give you some examples of where the airborne, mobile and static systems are being applied by users around the world. So Optech was founded in 1974. It was in fact in June 1974. So last month was our 40th anniversary in the LiDAR business. Today we're about a $50 million revenue company, approximately 200 people, offices in Toronto, Canada, and a couple of offices in the USA. Our core technology has been LiDAR right from the very beginning, although we recently supplemented that by buying two camera companies in 2010, Dymac and Geospatial Systems Inc., because as we know, LiDAR and camera often goes together, and Optech wanted to be more deeply involved in the integration of the camera technology. And I have to also share with you the fact that in 2012, Teledyne Technologies purchased a 51% controlling stake in the company. We're still managed and operated as a family business today. So Optech's differentiation is that we have a long history of industry firsts. We were the first to produce a commercial airborne laser mapping system. That customer was in Germany. We were the first to release a purpose-built mobile scanning system. That customer was in Italy. That was the Optech Lynx mobile system. We were the first for long-range terrestrial scanning with the Eros. And we were the first for bathymetry systems, which went to Sweden in a Larsen system. Underground mining. We did very early work with commercial LiDAR for methane detection or atmospheric LiDARs. And probably more recently, the last 2 points was we built the first UAV LiDAR system, and that was back in 2008, and that was for a military client. And interestingly enough, we put the first LiDAR on Mars. So there's an Optech LiDAR sitting on Mars. That's not a mapping LiDAR, that's an atmospheric LiDAR. So we've demonstrated the ability to undertake projects from research to development into standard product offerings for quite a good period of time. And that's been the foundation of Optech. So let's focus, because airborne LiDAR is a big part of our business, let's talk a little bit about the history of airborne LiDAR systems. We first got involved with them back in 1977, and these were terrain profilers or laser profilers. And there's a couple of slides there, a couple of pictures on what that system looked like. They were running at 100 hertz, 100 measurements per second. The first one was built for the Canadian Centre for Remote Sensing, and it was mounted in a DC-3 decoder. Not long after that, we did a bathymetry version, so we had a profiling system for bathymetry. So right from the very beginning, we operated in both the topographic and the bathymetric space. And over time, those systems started to mature and gain in more power. We're up in '84, we're up to a 2 kilohertz system, 2,000 points per second. And on the bathymetry side, we introduced a rotating mirror or nutating mirror system back in 1984, which was for a 20 hertz laser, so 20 measurements per second laser for bathymetry. One of those systems was modified for mine detection. That was the alarm system in '87. The first prototype of the topographic system, the ALTM, was developed in 1993. This was what we call Big Blue. And this system was deployed into Japan for demonstration, and that's on the right-hand side there you'll see an example of Big Blue mounted in an Eros helicopter, one of our customers in Japan, and that was a 2 Hz laser. The bathymetry systems continued to develop. We had external pod-mounted systems, the Hawkeye system, and then really the modern era of the ALTMs began in about 1995, and this was the first of the ALTM series officially. And in that photo there are 3 people that I still know. 2 of those people are still in Optech. So we have a good history of innovation within the company and maintaining that innovation. What that picture shows you is the Big Blue versus the ALTM 1020. So it got shrunk over that period from the original prototype. That was a 5 kHz laser and could fly at 1,000 metres. We pretty quickly followed up with the 1225. That was a 25 kHz laser and could go up to 2,000 metres. And for the first time we integrated an Planix POS in there, position and orientation system. So that was quite a milestone. And you can see the somewhat familiar construction of the electronic and the sensor head that was carried through for a number of years into the 3100, which has been used here in India, and also the Gemini, which was the first system to introduce multi-pulse. And I'll come back to multi-pulse a little bit later and describe what actually multi-pulse means. 2008 was that UAV system that we designed. This was for the US government, military customer. They gave us an objective in meet certain requirements in volume, power, weight, altitude and performance. We exceeded all those things on delivery. And that box there represents what we call the ALTM Orion today. That's a sensor which we deliver to commercial customers, but has also been used as a UAV in the military-grade UAV space. Today, that's what that sensor looks like, combined with a camera that would sit on the floor of an aircraft over the porthole, so that we could capture imagery and LiDAR simultaneously. And he's operating at roughly at 300 kHz. So you can see that the laser technology has developed remarkably well. What we've also done with that is been able to, because of the compact size of it, been able to mount it into a gyro-stabilised mount. So we can put the sensor, the LiDAR sensor and the camera together into a gyro-stabilised mount, so we get a much cleaner collection of data in terms of the swath and the overlaps. The laser data itself is clean. It's the swath, the layout of the lines as they're collected because of the gyro mount improves that very nicely. And we'll see some example of that. And then in 2010 we introduced the Pegasus, which was, we've seen the growth of the laser technology. Every year the laser technology gets better. Well, what about putting 2 lasers into a system? Therefore we can double our point densities, for example. And so that was the introduction of the Pegasus, where it has 2 lasers firing simultaneously, one nadar and one slightly forward. And the system is able to keep those 2 laser systems operating and keep the data, if you like, separate without causing confusion. And if you see in that example there, the slide of the point cloud, the red represents one channel and the green represents another channel. 2012 was the coastal zone mapping and imaging LiDAR system, the bathymetry system, which is our current model. This is the SeisMIL system. It has 8 channels, topographic channels, 70,000 soundings per second, and a deep channel, so a bathymetry channel of 10,000 measurements per second. And it has quite an interesting scanning technique where it scans in a circular pattern, so for any particular object we get 2 views. We get a forward view and we get an aft capture of the point cloud. And we can combine this sensor with hyperspectral scanners, so we have the yellow box in the middle represents a hyperspectral scanner, and we can also put frame cameras there, so we can really collect multi-sensor imagery on that one mission. So the history of the ALTM family has come from profilers to single scan pulsing systems, to multi-pulse systems, and now multi-channel systems. And our 2 most recent and current systems are the Orion generation, which is the small box, the the UAV-derived system, and the Pegasus. I want to talk about some of the technologies that go into an airborne LiDAR system, and multi-pulse was a significant milestone along the way when we introduced that with the Gemini system. So single pulse systems have a time of flight limit. There's a limit of how much time can be elapsed between the time you send out a pulse to when it comes back. And that's represented by the lower line there, the black line. And that means that we always had to wait for the pulse to come back before we could send the next pulse. So there was enough energy in the pulse that we could have actually had more time. So and this is really the concept of multi-pulse, is that we no longer have to wait for the previous pulse to come back. We can send a second pulse, so we have two pulses running at the same time, and it can even be more today. So this allowed us to take what was a single pulse limitation of, say, 1,000 metres at 100 kilohertz. We could stretch that to 100 kilohertz at 2 kilometres, so we could fly higher. And of course the benefit of that is we're covering a larger area, so we're more efficient. So multipulse was quite a defining technology. And all of our ALTM systems today essentially have multipulse. We also have talk about the laser pulse recording system. And in this situation, there are two methods of capturing the laser data. We can do it discretely, or we can do it with a waveform. And we put a lot of effort at Optech to pull out those key points discretely and in real time, because it leads to a much more efficient workflow. The data volumes that we need to deal with are much, much less. And, you know, for a large part of the projects you're going to be doing, you're going to be hitting only a surface once, such as a road, such as a building. There's only one reflection coming back. It's only when you get into vegetation and the odd corner of buildings, etc., that you end up having multiple returns. So our focus was to put a lot of effort in capturing those returns in real time for maximum efficiency down the line. So we can offer both. We have systems which will capture both. So the pulse separation between the first pulse and the second pulse has also improved over time. So we've come down from 2.1 metres down to about 0.7 metre. That is between the first echo and the second echo. And waveform digitising, you know, typically run at 1 nanosecond, which is about a 30 centimetre, 0.3 of a metre resolution. So we're not that far away from waveform resolution either. And as I say, waveform is probably most relevant in forestry type applications, much less relevant for urban mapping. But also, having said that, we're moving beyond 4 returns. Our systems are expanding to be able to handle more than 4 echoes and approaching the waveform resolution. We also have the ability for real-time point cloud generation, and here we can see some examples of the swath which has been completed, and you see it's a very irregular pattern because we're not using a gyro stabilised mount. But what we also see on the current flight is a waterfall of the point cloud, so we can actually see the point cloud in real time as we're collecting it, so that we know whether we've got gaps between our data with the previous strips. So this facilitates confidence in the collection. We can detect our gaps while we're in the air and save money and not have to land and go back and refly. And potentially we can do the transmission to the ground. We can do real-time transmission to the ground if you have that infrastructure, that communications infrastructure in place. Another example where we put a lot of effort was on a LiDAR point bundle adjustment. Surprisingly, I come from a photogrammetry background where bundle adjustments have been widely used for many years. They haven't been used in LiDAR only very, very recently, and Optech introduced one of the first systems to produce bundle adjustment of LiDAR point clouds. Previously, it was a very manual, very interactive process with software. 2 people could do it, 2 people would deliver 2 different results. You could never get consistency out of it, and of course it wasn't automated. So we've introduced a system called the LiDAR mapping suite, which allows us to do a rigorous mathematical adjustment of all the strips. How do we do it? We do it by tie planes. We look in the point cloud for tie planes. They can be on buildings, they can be on the ground. And the example on the lower left shows buildings where we've got tie planes from a terrestrial scanner. Tie planes can be anywhere so long as 3 points make a surface. We have certain criteria that needs to be satisfied, of course. Not all tie planes are accepted. But tie planes allow us to join strips together. The basic requirement is we must have redundancy. That means we must have some overlap in the point cloud from one strip to another strip. And so the process, as I say, works for airborne, it works for mobile, and it's fully automatic. And the results are presented in a graphical sense, such as a graph on the before and after scenario where we can apply the corrections. And we can even do it by extracting the roof lines of a building and see what was the situation before and what was the situation after. We're going to be extending that from beyond the point cloud to also the imagery in the near future to be able to process imagery. I wanted to finish off and just talk about sensors at work, what the sensors are doing around the region. The first project which came to mind was the Singapore Land Authority. They're doing a large-scale urban development of the whole island, 716 square kilometres, 1,500 metre flying height. These are the LiDAR parameters, flown at 400 kilohertz, 6 points per square metre, up to 18 points per square metre, 15 centimetre accuracy, and a roughly 5 billion points in that project. They used an Optech Pegasus, and the flights were mostly undertaken at night because of the restriction of air traffic control around Singapore. It meant that they had to operate whenever they could, and night was the best time to do that, which is one of course, the key advantages of LiDAR technology. There'll be separate flights also capturing oblique imagery, and there'll be a phase 2 where they map the whole island by mobile technology, and they'll merge those airborne data sets and those mobile data sets together in the next phase. The second one I want to talk about is the Philippine flood risk mapping. This is a project which has been running now for about 2 years. University of the Philippines is executing the project. It's called the DREAM project. They've got LiDAR sensors flying at 800 metres, average 1 point per square metre, and about 0.2 metre vertical accuracy. They're deploying 3 sensors on that project, Pegasus, Gemini and Aquarius. And just to give you an idea, in February they flew 12,000 square kilometres. That's about 1.2 million hectares. Phenomenal effort. They operate two missions per day, so they have enough crew where they land, they change crew, change pilot, off again they go. And this is an internally funded project, so it's an impressive result. The objective of DREAM is disaster, risk and exposure assessment for mitigation. And this is to generate flood hazard maps and inundation models used for a 6-hour early warning. And the initial project was to survey 18 major river basins and create 3D maps used for flood simulation and rainfall events. Quickly look at the city of Iligan in Mindanao, where they had a major typhoon in December 2011. High mountains rushing down the river to the sea, high tides restricting the outflow, lots of flood. Death toll, unfortunately, 490 people, 90,000 people displaced, $350 million of economic impact. That's the village at the mouth of the river. And this is the LiDAR model with the flood simulation of a 100-year event. I don't know how well that's showing on your screens, but the deeper the purple colour, the more the flooding. We'll drill down on that a little bit more. These are some of the flood inundation models they did. This is the 1 in 5 year. This is the 1 in 25 year. This is the 1 in 100 year. And their aim was to be able to publish these warnings online within 6 hours. So they had different levels of warning up to a major flood advisory warning number 3. And this was disseminated to the local communities. All of this is built around LiDAR data. Phase 1 is nearing completion. Phase 2 is about to begin. 300 more river systems will be mapped. Let's talk about integrated LiDAR and sonar data. So we can take, again, this multi-sensor approach where we don't stand alone anymore. So in this scenario here, we've captured both the bathymetry data from a multi-beam system as well as the topographic data from a static laser scanner. So one position and orientation technology being fed by 2 sensors. So here the scenario was fast response. The response handlers wanted to know the scenario of where this ship was lying, how dangerous was it lying. They needed it from a topographic point of view, and they also needed it from a bathymetry point of view. So a very short turnaround in terms of the collection to the delivery of that product. Similarly, a more traditional example is this is an LNG terminal and the Port of London Authority, where they've wanted to capture the above waterline and below waterline. A similar example. In this case, they're interested in the scouring along the seabed caused by the tide running in and out. Lesang Diamond Mine in South Africa, Lesotho actually, purchased an Optech system, a tripod-mounted system, where they could use it to monitor slope stability. And this is a big problem in a lot of mines around the world, monitoring the stability of the earthworks that are going on when there's blasting and heavy vehicle movement. The pits are about 200 metres deep. The requirement in this case was a monitoring system which would constantly scan and review and report. So the requirements were they needed internet, they needed power supply to drive the scanner, and of course they needed some kind of enclosure, protection enclosure. The system had to be fully automatic. So automatic processing, automatic scanning, automatic reporting. And so the system which was built satisfied them. It's called an open pit mine monitoring system that one of our partners developed together with Optech. And so the customer, the client, can get text messages, he can get emails, he can get alarms, whatever he needs to be able to address critical issues which may appear. And then he can drill further down to see what is causing those problems. He can go back historically to see what was the situation the day before or the hour before. You can set those kinds of scan parameters. And finally, I'll finish off with a mobile example here. This is from the UK. This is one of our clients there. They're using a mobile scanning system that could be used here in India today. This system was 2 times 200 kilohertz, had some cameras, GPS, IMU. System capable of 500 points per square metre at 80 kilometres an hour, so very, very high density, 2 centimetre accuracy, relative accuracy less than a centimetre. Today that system would be 2 times 600 kilohertz system, so we're collecting 1.2 million points per second today. We can integrate it with 360-degree cameras as well. So they've been doing highways in the UK. What have they discovered from that? It's 16 times faster than traditional methods that they've used in the past. It's 40% more cost effective than going out there in the field manually like they were doing in the past. And they can produce suitable 1:500 scale mapping from this data without traffic management schemes, meaning they're not blocking the highway and they're saving money. And the risk is also reduced because they haven't got people wandering around. And, you know, even in the more traditional sense, when they're out in the rural areas, they're able to pull out the kinds of products that engineers want to see. They want to see cross-sections, profiles, contours. In this case here, they're getting 25 centimetre contours. So I just would conclude by saying that, you know, those are examples which really inspire us at Optech to produce even better technology, and I hope that in the near future we'll see as good, if not better, examples from customers here in India. I thank you.